Hey there, folks. I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and did you want a long episode by the end where no one winds up happy? Good, cause it's Billboard BREAKDOwn. I don't remember. And here I was thinking this week would be easier to talk about, at least a little bit slower, but it turns out it was more of a case of a delayed fuse with Travis Scott's Utopia, as the majority of the losses occurred here when we got a pretty massive influx of new songs, some of which you can attribute to Karol G, who is getting a reputation for more chart impact than folks might predict, but also for... Okay, yeah, let's get this over now. Debuting at number 1, Men North of Richmond by Oliver Anthony. We'll get into the song's quality and a lot of the controversy around this guy later on in the episode, because there are layers to this conversation that need to be unpacked in detail, but it's important to highlight he's not just here thanks to the sales. There's a lot of streaming behind this song and Oliver Anthony as well, and while the radio just, of course, has no idea what to do with this, to say it's purely a product of sales astroturfing? No, the data doesn't back that up. And as someone who ran this series through the summer of 2021, I know what dubious sales tactics really look like. That's not to say I'm really happy about this, mostly because it strands Fast Car by Luke Combs at number 2, a much better song where the working class struggle feels more lived in and real. Talk about ironic. I'm not sure how much more momentum it really has. This was the week to really break through, but with dips on sales and streaming and radio seems like it's peaking, I just don't know. Then we got Last Night by Morgan Wallen at number 3, still absolutely rules streaming, but radio's on the downswing fast. I can see this dropping off relatively quickly, and that opens up the door for Cruel Summer by Taylor Swift at number 4. Yeah, streaming is stable and the radio is surging, but it's going to come down to the margins, because while it's got a lead over Fast Car on streaming, as I predicted, it lags enough on the radio that I'm just not sure it's going to be able to catch up or break through. Now, it did rise over Calm Down by Rima and Selena Gomez at number 5. The radio is very clearly peaked, but I think it's going to be a pretty slow descent with this one. And then next we got Vampire by Olivia Rodrigo at number 6. And this is kind of interesting. It seems like streaming has stabilized just enough for the radio continuing its major push, and I think that any future growth will depend on how much this is going to last with that album coming in a couple of weeks. And that place is Fuck You Mean by Gunna in an odd spot. Streaming is still very solid, and the radio is finally starting to get behind it, but might be too little, too late. We're gonna have to see. Next, we got 2 songs from the Barbie soundtrack that seem relatively stable. Dance the Night by Dua Lipa is at number 8 because the radio adores it, and Barbie World by Ice Spice, Nicki Minaj, and Aqua at number 9, which has a little bit more streaming, but made up a lot of its radio margin this week. I'm actually kinda shocked how much of a push that it seemed to get. Finally, also debuting at number 10, we've got a second Olivia Rodrigo song with Bad Idea Right. I'll get more into this later on, but suffice to say the streaming has actually got behind this pretty quickly. The question's going to be how much it lasts. I do have a good feeling. Now this neatly takes us to our losers and dropouts, of which there are a couple notable ones in the latter category. Eyes Closed by Ed Sheeran and Thought You Should Know by Morgan Wallen. They both comfortably clinched their year-end list spots for 2023. And it looks like Fragile by Get Rizza Su Esencia and Grupo Frontera, and BZRP Music Sessions Volume 53 by Bizarre Rap and Paisa Pluma. Those two are going to fall well short. As for the losers, okay, let's get the Travis Scott songs out of the way quickly. With Playboy Cardi's at 37, K-Pop with Bad Bunny in the Weekends at 41, My Eyes at 69, Topia Twins with Rob 49 and 21 Savage at 73, and Thank God's at 97. Might as well tack on Morning by Post Malone, also seeing an unfortunate loss down to 84. Outside of that though, You, Me and Whiskey by Justin Moore and Priscilla Block lost all of its gains down to 50, Super Shy by New Jeans slid down to 79, and Heartbroken by Diplo, Jesse Murph, and Polo G just continues to flop. Good. Now on to our returns and gains, and wow, there is not much of either here. In the former group, I'm not exactly surprised to see that S91 by Karol G came back in a big way to 45 thanks to her release this week, nor am I that surprised by But I Got a Beer in My Hand by Luke Bryan at 100 because radio is finally getting on board with this song. But for the gains though, okay, I guess I shouldn't be that surprised that Save Me by Jelly Roll featuring Lainey Wilson saw a boost to 75, but I am kinda shocked that Dawn Yawns by Zach Bryan featuring Maggie Rogers picked up to 87. I mean, maybe it's a rising tide, raising many ships. Something to maybe think about here if you catch my drift. But again, we've got a very busy and very long week ahead with 14 new arrivals. Karol G accounts for 5 of them, which is just below my album bomb threshold. So let's get this all started with number 99, Lose Control by Teddy Swims.
When you're not next to me, I'm falling apart right in front of you. Can't you see?
So here's an interesting case, and one that we actually haven't seen in some time. A guy who started off doing covers on YouTube and was able to parlay that into a major label record deal, where he's been steadily dropping EPs since 2021, even if this is the first time I've really heard of him. Now, this is his first song to cross over proper, and okay, what we have here is the sort of pop soul that I'd slot closer to Riverdale core for the blown out throwback bombast. I mean, man, the clipping in this mix gets distracting. It doesn't feel nearly as organic as it should, but Teddy Swims has a little bit more groove, and his gravelly presence is generally pretty impressive, especially that guitar solo that rips open to compliment him before that final hook. But then there's the content. It's relatively basic, the sort of "if I can't have your love, I'm gonna die" track that it's playing for high melodrama honestly just kind of comes off really clingy. I think if the mixed texture was a bit warmer or more organic, I would buy into it more, but as it is, it's fine, I guess. Teddy Swims has one hell of a voice, I'll give him that. But after listening to a lot of Hosier recently, I can't say this impresses me. Number 98, Mona Lisa by Dominic, Fike.
Turn the radio down, and you can't think of anyone else. And love is when you try to make it out alive. But you can't turn the radio down, and you can't think of anyone else.
Oh, this has been long in coming. For those of you who don't know, my antipathy towards Dominic Fike goes back a couple of years now. I've never liked his mewling singer-songwriter dreck. He was a major factor as to why the second season of Euphoria was such a mess, and that's before I get into some of the nonsense he said publicly. So, to say that I had rock-bottom expectations for this guy finally hitting the Hot 100 on his own is putting it mildly. So let me be fair to this. On a construction level, it's passable. There's some decent rollick to the groove, the lyrics have a good enough flow to them, the hook is kind of sticky, and even if the mix is distractingly compressed, this would be a fine enough pop song. But we're stuck with Dominic Fike here, who just does not engage me whatsoever on the mic, especially with how mushy his delivery is. And that's before we examine all the mewling effects around the weedy acoustics, the really cheap sounding percussion, and the painfully weak drop. Then there is the content, where it seems like Dominic Fike still has some lingering feelings towards the girl in question, that he's trying to deny himself and that she didn't treat him well and would ever exit. But then we get the pre-chorus, which is where all she wants is an apology, and Dominic Fike's trying to be magnanimous about it all with a lot of half-formed warnings that are only designed to pull her back in, kind of neg her a bit. But that leaves the lingering implication that he's the one who ultimately started this and did something, got dumped, and now he's trying to jerk her around. And there's this noxious smugness that I just do not like at all. I mean, it's a fine enough structure of a song. I get why it would work for some folks. I just really don't care for it. Next, number 96, Love Me Again by V.
Love me again. No, I don't want nobody else. I wish you could love me again.
So the last time I talked about V, it was for a Christmas song back in early 2022, and while I actually liked that song more than I expected, I also think it's probably a mistake to judge an act off their holiday material, so I wasn't really sure what to get with this. And well, it actually plays to some of the same formula as that last song, with the hazy guitar backing up his husky vocals amidst a lot of misty backing echoes. But that's kind of where the similarities end, as between the snap beat, the drippy trap flourishes, and the let-in percussion, the groove is much blockier, and when you translate the lyrics, the post-breakup angst can feel a little bit cloying, kind of oversold. It honestly reminds me a lot of mid to late 2010s R&B, and while that guitar is nice and is doing some heavy lifting, it's not some of the better stuff in that subgenre. It's not bad. I'm probably not going to seek this out. Number 95, Amagura by Karol G.
Baby, qué amargura me da saber que ahora tú estás
So okay, we got 5 songs from this Karol G project / mixtape to get through, and we're starting off with a cut that's actually been out for some time. One of the deep cuts in the late singles that just never crossed over when she had her album bomb. And what is it with the anxious post-breakup songs overrunning with angst this week? This is the 3rd of them in a row, and you know what, to be fair, it's probably my favorite of them, thanks to Ovi on the drums' rougher, more forceful reggaeton groove in order to back up the watery melody full of all these guitar flourishes. A few a little bit too weedy for my taste, and Karol G being a fair bit better at selling heartbreak from a distance, especially as she's desperately trying to hold it all together and mostly failing. So, you know what? Yeah, this is a pretty decent song. I'll take it. Number 86, Pretty Little Poison by Warren Zeiders.
She's my pretty little poison. My pretty little poison.
You can chalk up Warren Zeiders as one of those guys blowing up thanks to TikTok and who Warner scooped up to throw some money behind, with some mixed reviews in his wake. This is the title track from his debut album that recently dropped, and while I'm tempted to call this the 4th song in a row about angsty post-breakup blues, this is more about a lightly toxic relationship that he's just drawn back to time and time again, and honestly, he kinda seems to be into it. And that's fine. Zeiders, or is it Zeiders? I'm not sure. He's got pipes, and he certainly is selling this with a lot of raw energy. Honestly, he sounds a little bit like he's over-singing, not the first time we're going to see that this week. And Ross Copperman's production, while feeling a little bit compressed, is remarkably organic in the guitar tones and the drums. But I also don't get much that feels all that special or unique about it. It's fine, it's generally competent, but it doesn't feel that memorable, and when you're pushing a new act on his big major label debut for this sort of single, might be an issue. All I'm saying. Number 83, Okie Dokie by Karol G. Alright, we're now onto the songs proper from this Karol G mixtape, and okay, I do not like this at all. For one, man, this reminds me a lot of Rosalia, particularly some of the more spare experimentation from Motomami that just didn't really work for me, between the oily synths, the processed but chirpy backing vocals that seem to be trying to create this anime cutesy vibe, the very stock reggaeton beat, and even some of Karol G's cadence in singing this song. Now, when I translated the lyrics, I got the appeal very quickly, beyond just the Rosalia factor. Karol G is playing openly to both men and women and trying to coyly assert dominance and get this girl to leave her partner. Normally not my thing in songs like this already, but she is more convincing in some of the detail than most. But honestly, the production got on my nerves very quickly. I don't think this is good at all. I'd skip it. Number 82, Ain't Got a Dollar by Oliver Anthony.
I don't need a dime. I got a little spot in the country where I spend all of my time.
It's a both blessing and a curse that Billboard BREAKDOWN drops over a week after a new act breaks through, because I'm given time to take in all of the discourse, for better or for worse. And wow, around Oliver Anthony, it's been fucking dismal from both sides of the aisle, with some of the most bastardized and bad faith attempts to explain a sound that I know for a goddamn fact that the majority of you are not that familiar with, because I'm one of the few people who on this entire goddamn platform who actually covers it, and barely any of you watch the reviews. Even if I gave you a list of names right now, like, I don't know, Cole Chaney, Pony Bradshaw, Tyler Childers, Charles Wesley Godwin, I could very easily go on. And when I say all that, this goes beyond just the indie country or those Appalachian folk singers, and into the realms of true amateurism in the music industry, who might get a brief flash on Bandcamp or a minor bit on TikTok for a day or two, and they don't get the label cleanup job. That's a major factor as to why I know he's not some industry plant from the majors, or especially Music Row in Nashville. He's just got so much more of his baggage visible that y'all just don't see about your more polished favorites, or that you refuse to say publicly about your own beliefs outside of your alts and your private Discord servers. Yes, the big song that we will absolutely get to. It absolutely got boosted by right-wing marketing hacks in order to go viral. Although, if you have any eyes inside that scene, and the majority of y'all don't, you might learn that there's actually a lot of finger-pointing at who deserves credit or how organic it really is, even there. As if any pop stans give a shit about organic growth as long as their favorites go to number one. Do not deny it. I've got the receipts if you want to relitigate the past several years. You will lose that argument. Now, for some of the right-wing types, it's because populist movements can become really difficult to control, especially when the guy in question is not as political or traditional as they want him to be, which is why they're gonna throw this guy aside outside of this viral moment. You think scum like Matt Walsh have any interest in Oliver Anthony having an actual career? He's still not signed anywhere. But I also think closer to the center, there is something about the populism that strikes a chord with a less vocally online demographic who might not have been exposed to this sound before, or maybe just heard something in the orange and need to be shown more in the scene. So success is not purely artificial or astroturfed. The streaming numbers kind of prove that, where the big song got playlisted because it's obvious lazy curators at Spotify, they wanted their own quick viral boost for a subgenre that otherwise does not get that much attention. And hell, the biggest proof of some of this being organic, we got a second song from Oliver Anthony that charted. They wouldn't do that grift for multiple tracks. Now, this isn't particularly interesting. The live recording is actually really rough with the spare guitar. The mix is kind of shoddy. Oliver Anthony doesn't have much in the way of subtlety for this sort of song that should probably feel a lot warmer given its homespun nature and the content about living off the land. It feels a lot more like a demo than a proper song, but it's also not bad in this subgenre. It's absolutely amateurish. I've got zero expectations it's gonna stick around. Sorry, Billboard, I don't buy your assertions here. This is not controversial either. Let's not oversell it. We'll get to the big one later on. Consider this a primer and a warning, though. I got a lot more to say. Number 68, Una Noche El Maldolin remix by Karol G, Cris MJ, and Ryan Castro.
Papi, dime si tú estás pa' mí, como yo estoy puesta pa' ti. Te llevo una noche a Medellin, que yo soy tuya.
Okay, a little context. The original song is being remixed from Cris MJ. The nasal guy's got the first hook in the verse, whose song first dropped in January of 2022. I'm not sure what drew Karol G to this, given the jerky, stuttering synths, the chopped up steel drums, and the lockstep reggaeton groove. But I don't know, compared to the two guys here, she easily has more charisma and swagger, especially given Ryan Castro's braying all over the second verse. As for the content, it's a dance track to get drunk and look hot to. Another reason why Karol G kind of runs away with it. But I wish the groove was a little bit more interesting. Give this song a little bit more unique character or flavor. As it is, it's fine, I guess, but I also know just how quickly I normally forget stuff in this lane. Take that as you will. Number 55, The Painter by Cody Johnson.
Every wall I built, she saw canvas. I thank God every day for how he made her. My life was black and white, but she's the painter.
So I feel like it's been a very slow process for me to come around more on Cody Johnson, but the more songs he's charted, the more I found that I've actually liked. His maturity is certainly shining through, and I was curious where this new lead-off single would wind up landing. Reportedly dedicated to his wife, with whom he's actually been with for 15 years in some relationship. And from there, it's a pretty straightforward love song, but it's actually a really nice one. The acoustics support the pedal steel and the fiddle pretty well, the gentle groove builds effectively, and Cody Johnson's eye for painting the detail of how she sees and adds more color to his life and her life, it's got a lot of charm. With the line, "With every wall I built, she saw a canvas," it's actually really poetic. Now, I do think the fiddles on the brief instrumental interlude can feel kind of tinny, and Johnson's singing feels a bit odd on this song. He starts off in a gruffer, lower register, but he does build up to belt a couple of times, and the shift in between his head voice and his chest voice can feel kind of obvious. But to be frank, I'm nitpicking. It's another really nice song. I'd say it's worth checking out. Number 52, Supposed to Be Loved by DJ Khaled, Lil Baby, Future, and Lil Uzi Vert.
Smooth operator, ain't tryna be no hassle. I'm tryna love you like you supposed to be loved. I'm tryna love you like you supposed to be loved.
You know, in a year where some of the biggest discourse has surrounded how we haven't gotten much in the way of event albums, at least in the mainstream, because Lord knows the majority of people will never dare to listen to something that's not off the beaten path, but could well become an event. I mean, I guess DJ Khaled's the savior y'all were looking for. Maybe? Apparently this is tied into his next album. It's got a very expensive chipmunked Michael Jackson sample, and look, I'm not impressed. This is a pretty basic, buying girls expensive brand names as passing for love song. It feels like all three rappers are sleepwalking through their verses, although Uzi probably sounds the best overall, especially in the melody, but frankly, any melody here is swallowed up by the scratching, the bass, and the overmixed percussion that doesn't sound nearly as opulent as DJ Khaled seems to think it does. I don't know, Khaled used to have these big collab singles and then they felt like an event. This is starting to feel like routine, and not one I'm inclined to remember very soon. Next, number 29, Qlona by Karol G and Peso Pluma.
Te mentiría si no estoy loca por verte. Un ensayincito como te de Qlona.
Okay, last two Karol G songs here, where I'm not remotely surprised this charted with the Peso Pluma feature, but make no mistake, this isn't actually going for any regional Mexican sound, with the thicker but brittle knock of the reggaeton percussion and the muffled but kind of wiry guitars. If anything, it highlights how Peso Pluma's elasticity to fit into this sound might actually start to work against him. His nasal delivery just does not have anything close to the same level of character and charisma Karol G has. Granted, this is also very much in her comfort zone, where she sounds outright frustrated at how attractive this girl is that they're both lusting over, to the point where she's actively cussing her out. Honestly, even through the translation, I think this translates pretty well. It connects, especially as Karol G can sell sensuality really effectively. I'm not going to call this great. Peso Pluma doesn't really do much to elevate it, but I enjoyed this more than I thought that I would, so take that as you will. Number 22, Mi Ex Tenia Razon by Karol G. And now for the last one. And for a change of pace, it's actually a very different instrumental palette than what you might expect, leaning more into cumbia with its languid upstroke guitars, the sandy percussion, some of the softer delivery, and a chiming instrumental interlude that honestly didn't sound like much of anything that I would have expected from Karol G of all people. She calls this her tribute to the 90s Latin pop icon Selena, and you know what, I kinda hear it. And I also really like the content, very obviously referencing her breakup from Annual AA. The title translates to My Ex Was Right, where he had said that she would never find someone like him, and she counters by saying, yeah, he was right. She found someone far better, who's giving her more happiness and confidence, and she sells it with a sort of understated joy that really works for her. You know, of all the songs from Karol G that hit the Hot 100 this week, this is probably my favorite, and when you factor in that music video, I get why it charted this high. It's a really damn good song. I'd say it's worth checking out. Hope it sticks around. Number 10, Bad Idea, Right? By Olivia Rodrigo. Okay, so I'm still kind of mixed on Vampire. The campy theatricality is welcome, but the production feels kind of flimsy in order to sell all of it, and I can't shake the feeling that Olivia Rodrigo adapted an old Christina Perri draft in some of the clunkier lines. Now, I was told this was a much stronger song, and you know what? I think it is. Very much a heavier, turn-of-the-millennium slice of pop rock with several passing glances at Wet Leg, but with an attitude that doesn't piss me off nearly as much as that band can. I think it helps that the guitar line in the groove has a little bit more squealing muscle to it and much thicker bass line, although the drum mixing can still feel weirdly blown out in spots. But the star of the show, it's Olivia Rodrigo herself. She's definitely playing the disaffected Gen Z young adult, complete with some really snappy cadences. This is a really quotable track, who is completely aware that she's gonna make a really bad decision to go back and fuck her ex, but I kinda get why she's indulging all that melodrama. He's hot, he's lonely, you're kind of bored, / not fully over him, / something about him is just so hot it short circuits your better impulses. It's totally not going to backfire. Right? But I like how Olivia Rodrigo frames her more of a reckless and morally questionable impulses. It is self-aware that it's not a good choice, but she's also going to pull you along for the ride for all this melodrama. That's what makes it fun. Now, I don't quite think it goes quite as hard as Good For You, but I like this more than Vampire. I can see this having legs. Great little song. I'm kind of psyched for Guts now. That kind of surprises me. And finally, number 1, Rich Men North of Richmond by Oliver Anthony.
All that you do is your dollar ain't shit, and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men, 'cause the rich men.
So I got most of my larger points out with the first entry from this guy. Let's talk about the big one. And ask the question why this has actually picked up so much groundswell. Because at least to me, it's not that surprising. A vague feeling of working class alienation, anger at Washington, D.C., with a dash of the old Reaganite welfare queen propaganda to misdirect the anger at other poor folks who actually have it worse, because nobody's immune to propaganda, especially in the United States, where Reagan's bullshit has lasted way longer than it should have, especially for folks who are less online. I mean, that's middle America, folks. And Oliver Anthony's distinctly messy politics and the place in his Overton window, it's way more common than, say, anyone watching the majority of my videos. I mean, I can say all this from the context of someone who knows this sound, and yeah, it's not that good. In fact, the accurate descriptor, it's amateurish, especially after hearing Ain't Got a Dollar. If Oliver Anthony was one of my patrons and asked me to review this for his own sake, I probably would turn him down. I've done that before. On a musical level, it's a bit better constructed, but it's still clunky, especially with the clumsy strumming and all the over-singing, and the lyricism that probably needed a third or fourth draft. The whole fudge rounds line, it's just bad, especially following the line of the obese milking welfare. And even if on my first listen I did think he was talking about food deserts, that's probably me being way too charitable, I can admit that. Honestly, the reason I think this song has captivated so many folks, though, is more playing to the general malaise of late capitalism, but not having the right words or concepts to find a better way, running more on emotion and anger than any sort of talent. Kind of reminds me of punk rock in that way, and before you call heresy because of how this was promoted, look up how plenty of punk acts they were put together by the labels for decades now, and just how much they really bought into what they sold. Look up the Sex Pistols for that. Or let me put it another way. You know how stealing your girl, it's a running meme for me on this show? It's because the cruel irony is that the audiences just take it. There's a little bit more glamour in the presentation of that hierarchy, so the audience gives that transgression against them a pass? I mean, it makes a lot of the whole leftist critique of this song and the subgenre ring so hollow, because it has nothing to really do with the admittedly mediocre messaging and everything to do with the aesthetic on display. When you're confronted with the awkward but relatively authentic framing, you're going to take the glitzy artifice that openly reinforces the established hierarchies and dumps on you all the more. And instead of going to any of the names I listed off, you're going to be content to ignorantly write off the entire genre as right-wing junk rather than acknowledge real diversity in the scene and a lot of independent artists who could sure use your support. It's not just that they're learning nothing, it's the refusal to even try to learn more that galls me so much. But I think a big reason some folks seem to hate this song so much is because they don't want to admit that Oliver Anthony being clumsy or misinformed or just ordinary, it's probably way closer to them than the multi-millionaire or billionaire acts they idolize, who they put on pedestals and they can treat as just entertainment. After all, consumption is the only way so many folks will perform their values. And it's also why a lot of folks have actually gotten behind this, regardless of politics. There's populism. But as for the song, yeah, I'll call it mediocre at best, kind of a headache at worst. But is it worth the maelstrom of horrendous discourse for the past couple of weeks that Oliver Anthony's received? And that's another thing. A lot of folks are real confident talking shit, but I know for a fucking fact that if you or your art got a tenth of the dissection or backlash that Oliver Anthony got, you would melt in the hot sun. The vast majority of people are not equipped to handle a platform that high, everything that comes with it. Hell, Oliver Anthony isn't. He's admitted that already. Sorry, Billboard. I don't expect this guy to stick around. I don't think he wants to. But what I've also learned is this one of the very few music critics who in the mainstream covers country on a regular basis and this scene, a whole lot of y'all failed this moment. And you've got less than zero interest in learning or showing any sort of empathy We're getting better. I shouldn't be as disappointed as I am. Because both the left and the right can recognize the malaise of capitalism. We can do better. Anyway, best and worst for this very long and stupid week. Best is going to Bad Idea Right by Olivia Rodrigo. Honourable mention to Mi Ex Tenia Razon by Karol G. Worst of the week is going to Okie Dokie by Karol G. Production just grates on my nerves. It happens. With dishonorable mention going to Mona Lisa by Dominic Fike. Frankly, he got off lucky. No, Oliver Anthony is in neither category here. Next week, my God, I'm hoping it's a lot less than this. Stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.